If you've been a follower of the channel, have looked at my builds in the past, you will realize two things about the way I like building in Remnant 2. One of them being that I really like the turret, and the other one being that I absolutely enjoy making mod-based builds, as I tend to not like firepower or just gun-based builds. Now, it occurs to me that I've never actually created a build that marries these two together and creates some kind of monstrosity that is still able to, deal a lot of damage, play really well, and actually employ both of these sides of the game that I like so much. Well, that is until today, because this build does exactly that. Alrighty, so because we are using the turret, we want to be putting the engineer into our prime archetype. We're doing this because we want high tech. High tech is what allows us to overclock this weapon, and while the turret does a decent amount of damage by itself, using overclock on a turret just gives it a huge amount of fire rate, damage, and everything, and actually just spins this gun up to just absolutely shred most things. This thing is a powerhouse at taking down big enemies and putting a lot of fire downrange on bosses, and this will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you with this class and allow you to freely move around and deal with other threats, or just using some of these mods on the guns that we're going to be looking at as well. Now, for the actual weapon itself, I recommend using the Vulcan. There's nothing wrong with trying to play this with the flamethrower or the impact cannon. The bottom line is the Vulcan is the more versatile one of the three, where the flamethrower is exceptionally good at dealing with close targets, and the impact cannon I think is relatively good with dealing with clusters of enemies and also just essentially chunking boss life. The Vulcan cannon kind of like sits right in the middle there, where it has a ton of range, it shoots really fast, and it also deals fairly decent damage, so it's one of the reasons why me loves it. Now, the other things that you have as a benefit from the engineer subclass is, of course, that you get metal worker, which gives us increased skill damage, and it gives us skill critical chance, which means that your turret is just dealing that much more damage. And it also actually gives you some other things here, like for instance, if you wanted to zip around the map, you could pick up the heavy weapon and you would have some increased movement speed and that sort of thing. And then of course you have the added benefit of surplus, which means that when you are using your turret, it has ammo, and this ammo ticks down, and you can actually use a relic to fill some of this ammo up, and oftentimes that can allow your turret to stay in the fight for longer, or it can give you a way to just quickly reload your ammo while your turret is on cooldown. Now, one last thing, just talking about this whole mechanic and everything before we move on, is that oftentimes the way that you should be doing this is you should be putting your turret down and then letting it shoot out almost all of its ammo, and then when it's almost empty, you overclock it, thereby getting an additional 25 seconds of just absolute fucking wanton destruction. And then at that point, the turret goes on to cooldown, and you consume a relic, gives you a little bit boost on the ammo, and then you can rinse repeat this entire process. Now, of course, the trait that comes with engineer is fortify, which gives us increased armor effectiveness by 50%, which is phenomenal and good and gives us survivability, so ain't nothing wrong with that. In our secondary archetype, we are using Archon. Now, generally speaking, if you are playing a mod-based build, you absolutely put Archon on as your primary, because you want that additional mod regeneration, which is the primary perk from Archon. However, with our rings, we are going to address this problem, and we're going to give ourselves tons of mod regeneration, so we're not really going to miss that perk all that much. However, we do still get the benefit of Amplify, which increases our mod damage by 50%, so now we have increased skill damage for our turret, but we also have increased mod damage for the mods we're going to be using, and gives us some crit chance on that as well. You also have power creep, which essentially allows when you cast a mod, 5% of your mod power spent will be regenerated by all allies. So this is a cool thing to play alongside other people, and just gives you some increased mod power regen. And then power leak over here, similarly to what we see on the engineer side, where we get ammo for our gun. If we use a relic with this, it actually gives us 200 mod power, in a way reloading our mods for us as well. And then 100%, well, that's 200 for both equipped mods, so in your equipped weapon as well as the one that's stowed. and then you get an additional to the current mod that you're using. So again, just an additional way there for you to just get a little bit more mod power, which gets you those mods back quicker, but that's really not going to be a problem with this build. Now, Flash Caster is not a fantastic trait for us to have, but it's okay nonetheless. This increases our modern skill casting speed by 50%, which means that we're going to be able to drop that turret down a lot faster, and we're also going to be able to load and prime those mods and shoot them out quicker. Now, we are using Reality Rune as our skill here, but this is entirely, you know, dealer's choice. You can decide what you want to use with this. I would say possibly, I don't know, I would avoid Havoc Form. It's not nearly as great as it took that massive nerf right around a couple of days after, or well, not a couple of days, but a week or two after launch. So really the two options here for me would be Reality Rune. I really like this because it creates this slow bubble around you. It slows bullets, it slows enemies coming in. It really allows you to control the battlefield quite nicely. Plus, it gives you a really fat, hefty damage reduction bonus of 25%. So that ain't nothing to scoff at. If you want to opt for something that's a little bit more saucy, you can take the Chaos Gate, which actually increases your damage that you deal, and it increases your mod regeneration, which feeds right into what we're trying to do here. But this, on the other hand, actually lets you take more damage. So, in my opinion, if you are playing this build solo, you should be looking at using the Reality Rune. If you're playing this build in a co-op setting, Chaos Gate might be a good idea, because you would then, in essence, be like the support character to away, and you're putting down turrets and you're fighting in the back row and you're shooting mods and all that shit, while whoever is up front, and therefore you can benefit from the positives of Chaos Gate without necessarily getting so much focus on you in terms of fire. And moving us over to the character page, so we can have a look at all the gear that we have equipped on here. Of course, as usual, you guys know me, I'm going 3-piece Leto Mark II. So that's on the head, the chest, and the boots. And then I'm going Labyrinth Gauntlets, because that just ends up being overall better stats than the Leto Mark II gloves. Now, using these 4 items together gives you a huge amount of armor, and then consequently to that, damage reduction. But it also gives you a fat amount of weight, which we're going to have to find a way to deal with, because at 90 weight we have a flop dodge chance, which means every time when we dodge, we won't in actual fact be making a roll. We'll just be doing this like weird little dive and falling on our stomachs. So we're going to have to find a way to deal with that, and we absolutely will. If we look at the stats itself, and of course these stats are influenced by some of the other items and also our traits, so we'll mention those when we get to them. But the bottom line is we're looking at a total damage reduction of 66.1 out of a maximum of 80%, of course, which is really good, and gives us just a huge amount of survivability out there. Now, if you are a person that is a little bit, you know, better at the game than I am, and you're able to dodge really well and you don't get hit a lot by enemy attacks, or for that matter, if you're not deciding to play on Apocalypse, you're playing on lower difficulties, then you can opt for going for lighter armor, which offers you less protection, but then in the end will free up one of your ring slots, which will make a little bit more sense once we actually look at the rings. Looking at our relic, I absolutely like using the Tranquil Heart due to the fact that this gives us just a flat amount of health regeneration by default. We don't have to do anything to earn this. Simply by equipping this relic, we get this 2 health regeneration per second. Now, we of course will be adding to this health regeneration with some traits and stuff like that, but this is just really good to have. And then when you use this, it doubles all health regeneration for 15 seconds. So oftentimes you can use this almost like preventatively when you know that you're about to take a bunch of damage or something bad's about to happen to you. You can absolutely activate this, and that'll oftentimes get you through the tough part. Now, in terms of our shards that I'm putting in here, of course I'm using mythic ones, but you should use whichever quality you farmed up to. I have 10% mod damage on here, 10% skill damage, affecting my 2 ways of dealing damage, of course. And then I have 10% elemental damage on here, because my mods will be dealing elemental damage, and therefore this gives us a little bit more. Now, you can experiment here if you want to give yourself a little bit more survivability. You can add armor in here, anything like that, because by default the build deals more than enough damage. Your main point should be to stay alive. You'll put your turret out, you'll shoot some mods out, and then you'll focus on staying alive. And if it's easier for you to do that by putting some survivability in here, you absolutely should do so. Now, when we come to the first weapon, I'm using the pulse rifle on here, but you should use any weapon you feel comfortable with, just as long as you can actually equip a mod to it. And on this mod, of course, I'm using my baby, the Firestorm. I'm a huge fan of this mod. I fucking dig it. It kills me as many times as I kill stuff with it. It's good shit. I love it. It's just it's fun all around. And you know, I'm a guy who enjoys a good barbecue every now and then. So this thing is barbecue 24/7, baby. So essentially what the Firestorm does is you shoot it, it creates the cyclone. The cyclone pulls enemies and stuff in, and it also sets stuff on fire and burns it. Now, one of the things that makes Firestorm good is the fact that this cyclone that sucks stuff in can oftentimes really lock down melee enemies that are trying to walk you down and engage you. And a lot of the times you can use this to lock off an entire area of the battlefield by just shooting a Firestorm in there. It starts burning, it sucks everything in, and everything that doesn't die is stuck in place there while you position to a better place to fight from. There are a couple of things that we can do to make Firestorm better, and we absolutely lean into that. We can make the actual Firestorm explosions and the suck zone of the Firestorm bigger, but we can also make the fire that the Firestorm causes and burns on the enemies also tick for more, which we will absolutely do. Now we pair this with Harmonizer because Harmonizer increases the damage of the Firestorm, but also allows you to generate 25% additional mod power for a stowed weapon. So this gives us a way to just get even more mod power back in. Not a lot of reason for me to spend time on my melee option, because that's literally, in my opinion, probably one of the last things that you're going to be doing with this build is going up to anything and hitting it on the fucking head. But I usually have Kralax on here because it does give me a way to reload on ammo if I want to with the use of transference. Plus, Kralax also just allows you to charge up a melee and throw it, and also apply shock to something if you wanted to introduce another status element to something. Now, I pair this with, in my secondary, the MP60R handgun. It's because it's just a really good sidearm. You can again use anything you want here. The main point just being that you need to have a mod slot open that you can use. So we want to be using one of two mods on here. In some of the footage that you've been seeing in the background, you've been seeing me using Song of Aether. And in some of the footage that maybe hasn't come up yet, you will see me using Tremor. Now, I think that these mods, by the way, the only thing that they have in common is both of them essentially do an AoE explosion. But they do vastly different things. And sometimes Song of Aether is better and sometimes Tremor is better. The difference between the two being that Song of Aether actually gives you a nice localized slow in the area where you shoot it. Plus, it also decreases the damage that the enemies deal that are stuck inside Song of Aether. So that is a really good effect, but also completely different to what Tremor does, where Tremor fires a projectile that essentially hits and then pulses with a shockwave, and these shockwaves deal a whole bunch of damage to the enemies that are stuck in them. So Tremor, I believe, is more of the DPS option, whereas Song of Aether is more of the control and survive option. However, in certain cases, Tremor, because of the fact that Song of Aether is shoot one shot and then you wait for it to recharge, you have multiple ammo for Tremor before it has to recharge. So it gives you an option of dealing more with, let's say, more enemies. Last but not least, I would say Song of Aether is probably your option for bosses, and Tremor is probably your option for if you're just mobbing and moving through an area. We pair this with Feedback. Feedback says that this mod generates 20% of single charge value as passive mod power, so generating back in, and then level turn on Feedback is mod damage generates 10% of damage dealt as mod power. So just way more mod power, just, you know, keeping on with feeding in that mod power, making sure that whenever you want to shoot a Tremor or a Song of Aether, it's available, and making sure that whenever you want to shoot a Firestorm, in fact, you can shoot Firestorm off cooldown, and oftentimes you'll have 2, 3, 4 Firestorms ticking on an enemy at the same time. Next up, we shall be looking at Amulet and Rings. So first of all, in our Amulet, we're using the Jester's Bell. Jester's Bell makes a lot of sense for us here because this increases our modern skill cast speed by 35%. Big fucking whoop. But casting a skill or a mod increases all of our damage dealt by 20% for 15 seconds. This is huge for us because the thing is, while yes, we only put a turret down every once in a while, we are constantly firing out Firestorms and Song of Aethers and Tremors and stuff like that. And every time we do that, we make sure that this buff is refreshed, so all of our damage is increased by 20%. That means the turret shots is increased by 20%. The fucking fire burning is increased by 20%. Bullets that you shoot out of the gun is increased. Everything is increased by 20%, and it's just good stuff. Now, in our first ring slot, we are using Burden of the Destroyer. Now, the Burden rings oftentimes have some kind of negative effect, and then they give you a positive effect in return. This ring obviously is no different, and this says that it decreases the ideal range of all of your firearms by 25%. We don't care about that because we aren't shooting these guns. We are shooting the mods from these guns, and this negative does not affect that. So what we do trade that negative for, though, is an increase to all damage by 15%, which is phenomenal. Our second ring is the Stone of Malevolence, which elemental damage generates 15% additional mod power. Now, this ring alone can carry this build just due to the fact that whenever you shoot a firestorm out, Stone of Malevolence is going to create so much mod power that it's just going to bring it back really, really fast. But when we pair it with some of the other options here, as well as what we're still seeing in the trait tree, that is when you start seeing the opportunity of shooting multiple firestorms before the previous ones have even expired. In our third, and let me just swap them around quickly just to continue on with that point. In our third slot, we should be using Burden of the Follower, another burden ring. This one reduces our fire rate by 15%. Again, don't care. We aren't shooting these guns. We're using the mods, but it increases our mod power generation by 50%. Now, this in conjunction with Stone of Malevolence is why we are generating such a monumental amount of mod power, and that's why we can keep on just shooting these mods out like it's, going out of fashion. Last but not least, we use Bright Steel Ring on here because this is what allows us to negate the increased weight, the heavy weight that we have from this armor over here, and this gives us a normal, or let's rather say the fastest evade roll, regardless of what our armor encumbrance is. This is the ring that I was mentioning at the start that you could potentially swap to something else if you are, confident in your way of playing and that you don't actually ever take a hit. So why would you fucking care about having light armor on? You can absolutely do that, and then this gives you another ring that you could potentially increase your damage with, something that increases mod damage, all damage, elemental damage, any of those things could potentially work here. And then last but certainly not least is traits. So of course on here we get from our archetypes, we get Flashcaster and Fortify, so that's done. Then the first one, which we absolutely should be picking up regardless of whether you are playing with other people or playing solo. However, playing with other people, I would absolutely advise this, is Kinship. What Kinship does is it reduces friendly fire damage dealt and also received by 80%. That means that if you walk into your own turret's fire line, that turret doesn't fucking immediately mow you down, which can happen if you don't have this trait. But more importantly, it means that you do not get completely and utterly wrecked by your own firestorms. Firestorm has no friends and will kill indiscriminately, and it deals a shitload of damage, and especially if you're close to it, you will get pulled into the suck zone. So without this trait, your own firestorms will kill you. So you absolutely need to be taking this so that you don't kill yourself, but at the same time so that you also don't kill your teammates. Then we pick up Regrowth because this gives us health regeneration of 1.5 per second. Now this stacks with our Relic, so there's 2 from the Relic, this 1.5, that's 3.5 per second just happening by itself. So this is fantastic to top us off whenever we take a little bit of chip damage. We take Swiftness, increasing our movement speed by 15%. I take this on all my builds. If you don't mind being slow like a fucking turtle, you can absolutely take these points out and not use them, but I can't do that. We take Vigor all the way up to level 10 so that we have 30 health coming from it. And we have 2 points in Endurance here by default, so it is what it is. And then you'll see once we put in these other points as we discuss them, you're going to be left with 1 point, and I end up putting that 1 point into Expertise here, giving me some more skill cooldown. Now, you could there's an argument to be made that you might want to put more points into this so that you get more access to your turret, but generally speaking, I don't find that to be a problem, since oftentimes, even if you're fighting the hardiest of bosses, those bosses don't survive more than, I would say, 2, possibly 3 rotations. And oftentimes, you can manage this just by using your Relic at the right time to reload the ammo on your turret so that you can use it. Now, Amplitude is the odd one out here, and this is the one that you're going to need to mess around with and play to your own comfortability. When I started with this build, I had Amplitude up to 50%, which means that it makes the firestorms fucking ginormous. This can be a really cool thing because it sucks a bunch of enemies in from all over the screen, which is super damn awesome. But at the same time as well, if you are fighting in a tight enclosed space, this can really suck, because you can shoot as many firestorms out that you can't move around freely. You're being sucked in by the firestorms, and yeah, so is the enemy, but they're taking swings at you while they're in there with you, and that can actually cause your death. So you should settle on a sweet spot here where you still get the increase from amplitude, and it still makes Firestorm sexier, but that also still allows you to actually function on the battlefield and not constantly be stuck in a vortex. Barkskin gives us 10% additional damage reduction when we put 10 points into that. And then last but not least, we are taking Siphoner, which gives us 3% base damage as lifesteal. So this means that once we get into a fight and we've got our turret out and we've got a couple of firestorms cooking some fools downrange, you are going to be getting so much life incoming that you would potentially be able to weather the storm of getting hit a few times, shot a few times, or something like that. Oftentimes, if you are repositioning and you put a turret down, you shoot 2 firestorms out, then this will heal you up to full hive in lickety split, and it can get you out of tough situations quite fast. So absolutely, I think the 10 points in Siphoner here is damn good. And that right there is it for the build. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Go ahead and give this video a like and comment. Tell me how you would change this, if this looks, exciting to you, what you would do to change this, all of those things. I'm super interested. I got a ton more, let's say, builds that I want to try out. Of course, we've got a whole bunch of other games that are distracting us right now, but I'm still very much invested in Remnant 2. Let me know how you are still enjoying the game. Keep an eye on the channel for other games that are also coming out soon and are currently being played, like Starfield and stuff like that. This is a variety channel, not just a Remnant 2 channel, so chances are I might be covering the game that you're interested, but I'm always open to suggestions, so let me know which games you're playing right now and what you'd like me to cover. I'm here to help out. Other than that, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next video, fucking cheers.